I'm out here at the combine, and while I'm trying to do work, I get breaking news that Jerrod Johnson is out. Maybe breaking news for you guys, not for me. So let's buckle up for some football talk and figuring out what the hell is going on in Houston.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
From H-Town to your town, including Indianapolis, today's episode and every episode of the Locked On Texans podcast is for Texan fans all around. Really fun show lined up for you today, man. I'm going to look at the new offensive line incoming soon for the Houston Texans. Nick Caserio said they will absolutely address the offensive line. Call to action, obviously, yeah, you need to. And I think this whole entire offseason is going to be built around preparing for the now and for the future, which is something that we got to dive into because Jerrod Johnson is out. What? This was his own decision, but what came to this decision? So we'll dive into that. Also, I'm going to open up today's episode just looking at the Combine Player Talk as I'm out here at the NFL Combine in Indianapolis. Got some player interviews. I think it's going to be fun, of which I want to stay a little bit at home, and we'll talk about can the Cougs tight end Tanner Cozelle stay at home for the Houston Texans. Got some good content there. Great interview back and forth. But today it's all about you guys, giving you guys a great show. Shout out to my everydayers from the Himalayas for making the Locked On Texans podcast your first listen of the day and for being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Hey, guys, listen here. The Texans, they got some things they're going to have to figure out. And I'm excited to talk about the Jerrod Johnson piece. Please stick around for that simply because he is out. It was his decision. But there's a reason why, and I also think we need to look at some of the clues as to where this could go for the future for the Houston Texans. And simply, what does this mean for C.J. Stroud? But Tanner Cozelle is a tight end that I like a lot for the Houston Texans. I mean, I think he'd be a mid to late round draft pick. That would allow for Houston to maybe prioritize other picks throughout the draft. Maybe look at offensive line, you look at running back, maybe look at D tackle, which is, you look at what Caleb Banks did at 6'6", 330 plus at that 40 time and his ability to be physical and his twitchiness inside. The Houston Texans could very well just address other needs at those first 3 to 4 picks in the NFL draft this year, but it doesn't mean they need to neglect tight end. I believe if they have a chance to get Kenyon Sadiq, they need to absolutely trade up for him. But that is what I want to do. For the Houston Texans, they could very well view this year's tight end class as a deep class. They could very well view the free agent class for the tight end group this year as a position where they can upgrade through free agency. However, getting an opportunity to talk with Tanner Cozelle, I got some great things that I wanted to share with you guys. So without further ado, your last game of the season was at the NRG Stadium. Throughout the process this week, have you had an opportunity to have any formal, informal meetings with the Texans? And can you envision yourself playing in Houston?
Yeah, absolutely. Houston was an absolute blessing to be in. I mean, it was the best year of my life so far, man. I had a great time with the coaches, and I've not had a formal meeting with the Texans yet. I've had an informal meeting with them, and I met with them at the Senior Bowl as well.
What are some of the things from a schematic standpoint do you think you can bring to any NFL offense, especially with your size, 6'7", great frame, great wingspan? Your coach talked about that at the last game of the year. And do you believe you can be somewhat of a red zone threat as well?
Yeah, just trying to be a quarterback's best friend, especially with my size and my catch radius. Along within the red zone, I think I bring a really big element that defense has to look out for, especially when you have mismatches with undersized guys. I think I can take advantage of that very well, especially in the red zone. I go up and get it, I think, really well.
Is there an area of your game where you feel like you need to improve on at the next level?
Yeah, just continue to develop as a run blocker and being physical and just nasty in the run game, sustaining blocks, being able to put people in the dirt with my frame and just continue to add strength.
From a tight end perspective, how comfortable are you running the entire route tree?
I'm very comfortable running the entire route tree. I think it's what I excel at, and I think it's what I can continue to do in the NFL.
Is there like a specific route that if they call your number to run this route, 9 times out of 10 you can come down with the ball?
As this one. It's a corner route. I think I could go up and get it. The quarterback can put it where I can go get it, and no one else can touch it, and I'll go up and get it every time.
How important is it to be on the same page with the quarterback in terms of communication, whether you have to check into a run, check out of a run? What goes into that? And each year you've been in college, how have you been able to excel at that?
Yeah, being on the same page as the quarterback is everything. Sometimes if the quarterback knows, I talk about it a lot, it's if this, then that. And if the quarterback knows if we get this, then my receiver's going to do that, and you're both on the same page, it's a really good recipe for success. And I think it was why I was able to have so much production, because I had a lot of trust for my quarterbacks, knowing that I was going to make the right decision on routes.
Can you give me a specific play or a moment throughout this past season where you and your quarterback were just absolutely on the same page and it led to a successful play?
Yeah, the touchdown against LSU.
I was there for that game.
Drawn up as a fade. I was supposed to run a fade, but I knew the ball was coming no matter what. It was a 6'5" DB, and it was kind of just a thing that happened on the fly, and he trusted me and still put it up, and that's where I got it.
You got to love that from Cozelle. I mean, I think he acknowledged areas in his game where he needs to improve, express where he thinks he excels at already at the collegiate level and how that can translate to the NFL. Also, a little bit of his desire to stay in Houston. He met with the Houston Texans at the Senior Bowl. You look at how Cozelle ended the year for tight ends, number 1 in reception, 3rd in receiving yards, 15th in touchdowns, 85th in drops. So he has strong hands. You also look at 4th in targets with 83 this past year, 34th in routes ran this year with just under 300. And so what he brings to a team, it's I'm honestly surprised he's not viewed higher by many people around the league as a tight end prospect. And I think when you look at how the tight end position has really grown over the past 15 years, and he mentioned, players like Greg Olsen as one of the tight ends that he's looked up to, and he also highlighted Sam Laporta as well. When you look at what they present to the game, they are multifaceted tight ends that can do different things at a high level. I love the fact that he pointed out he can be better as a run blocker, because if you look at what the Houston Texans need, but you also look at the trend around the league, 9 out of every, if you look at the top 10 tight ends in the NFL, when you look at what makes them a little bit special, right? You look at Greg Kittle, you look at a Sam Laporta especially when he's healthy. You look at let's go right here in Houston and look at the bounce back here from Dalton Schultz. What makes them successful is 2 things: understanding what their quarterback is looking for each and every play. And I thought it was important to ask him, when you have to check in and out of a play, how important is being on the same page with your quarterback, right? And so that is something that I think was highlighted during his time at U of H this past year. I mean, he was the number 1 weapon for them altogether. And also, you got to have a desire to run block, right? Obviously, it's hard to ask a tight end to go out there and perform like Trent Williams. It's hard to ask a tight end to go out there and perform like a healthy top 5 Larry Tunsil. But when you have a desire to, be a run blocker, then you look at the effort, and you also look at it from a mechanical standpoint. You just improve in that area of your game. And so for me, I like Cozelle a lot here for Houston. I mean, if they view Sadiq, who we didn't get an opportunity to talk with today, there were some podium issues for a few of the tight ends. So some of the guys we didn't get a chance to, chop it up with. But when I look at the priority list for Houston, tight end is very high. They could address it in free agency, but it all goes back to this for me. Nick Caley was not here for the Cade Stover draft, and I think this is important to point out, because as we transition to the next segment of today's show, did Nick Caley have everything offensively last year to operate his offense? No, obviously not. But we also got to look at just the power of him coming in and having a full year with the players offensively that he had to inherit. I mean, he had to inherit some of these guys. He had to inherit a bad offensive line that wasn't able to run block. He had to inherit a tight end room that guys weren't able to stay healthy or weren't able to do some of the things from a dynamic standpoint, schematic standpoint that he's looking for. So what he had to inherit, I thought he did a good job. The product was good, all things considered, and it was improved from the year prior. But let's not rule out Houston going to get another inveterate tight end in free agency and also addressing the tight end position late in the draft, going into training camp with 5 tight ends on their roster and the best 3 will win. He wants his offense to operate how he wants it to operate, and I think that's the perfect way to transition, because when we look at the offense operating or not operating, it's important for everybody to be on the same page. And in 2025, it felt like in many ways the offense was split. You had Kaylee and Cole, right? But you also had Moreland, who's out. Now we look at Jerrod Johnson, he's out. And it was on his own decision, but guys, he's out. And so let's talk about that and the ramifications that we can expect for now and the future. The quarterback is still under the microscope, especially, I think, with this decision being made by Jerrod Johnson. As the new year gets going, a lot of people are trying to simplify their routines, and dinner is a big one. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, and packed schedules, having an easy, reliable dinner plan makes a huge difference. That's where Home Chef comes in. Home Chef takes the stress out of cooking by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste amazing. They're rated #1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. It's easy to see why. Over 30 weekly options, including family-sized meals and different dietary choices. Everything arrives pre-portioned, so there's less prep, less mess, and no wasted food. It can't be wasted food in today's economy, right? My grandmother would have a fit if we waste food in today's economy. But Home Chef helps with all of that, so you don't got to make your grandmother mad. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering our listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/lockedon. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. A lot of free going on. You must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert. Also, Texas fans, especially for my business owners out there, workplace chaos. You got deadlines stacking up. You got your inbox overflowing with emails. And the one position you have to still feel is sitting open. When the pressure is on, you need the right hire. This is the job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Indeed sponsored jobs help you reach the people you actually fit, who actually fit what you're looking for, skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. Indeed goes find the right candidate. They go out there and get who you need. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I'll be talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates. Less stress, less time, more results, which is the great thing about Indeed. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. And also, listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Need a hire? The job is for Indeed sponsored jobs. Let's get back to a very important conversation. So when Nick Caserio said, when the stock is down, I talked about this and I highlighted it because I thought this could be potentially telling of the entire offseason going into 2026 and what the Texans do after next season. But he said when the stock is down, you invest in it more. This was in reference to Stroud being the quarterback. And also, this is when he highlighted that he's not going nowhere. He is the quarterback until 2026. I believe this indicates that what was around Stroud last year and maybe beyond last year just wasn't good enough. And Jerrod Johnson, in many ways, was a part of the Texans not being good enough offensively. And so, as I mentioned, Nick Caley wanted to get his pieces and his guys and his coaching staff and, players and coaches in here that are all on the same page. That's important. Now, it's important to highlight that Jerrod Johnson's decision was a mutual parting of ways. And this is what I was informed. I want to shout out my guy who informed me of this. The Texans were looking to make him essentially an assistant quarterback's coach. And for that, maybe in many ways, Johnson felt like that was a slap in the face. The title of an assistant quarterback coach may not look good in terms of a resume, or maybe the pay was demoted. But the decision was made between Johnson and the Houston Texans a week ago. This information was made privy to me on Monday. Now, this also goes back to a clip that Chris Sims was out there with Chris Sims, where he talked about C.J. Stroud needed to adjust his throwing motion. And now we look at Jerrod Johnson being gone, and Chris Sims highlighted that with C.J. Stroud's throwing motion, which is, hey, where did you hear that first? You heard it here on the Locked On Texans podcast in 2024. That's mechanically some of the things that made C.J. Stroud good broke down in the second half of the 2024 season, and that carried through 2025 in a lot of ways. And so Jonathan Alexander, friend of the show, great guy that he works for, he works with Houston Chronicle. He reported to expect more from Jerry Shapinski, who spent some time with Nick Kelly before with the New England Patriots, and his resume looks like, he worked with Tom Brady, assisted with the offense during the back half of the Tom Brady years. They won a couple of Super Bowls, worked with Jimmy Garoppolo, worked with Jacoby Brissett, worked with Daniel Jones in New York, worked with Ryan Fitzpatrick while in Miami. So he's been around some good to decent to a great quarterback to even a backup quarterback. And also, again, Jerry Shapinski was the Patriots offensive assistant between 2013 to 2015, and an assistant QB coach from 2016 to 2018. He was also the quarterback's coach in 2019 with the Dolphins. And so I think for Houston, not putting better talent around the quarterback is important, but also maybe they value just having a more consistent voice and coaching as well. The offense calls for being on the same page. Yes, that boils down to coaching as well. And so, again, I mentioned, for 2025, was it Kaylee and Cole, and was it everybody else figuring their way out? Was there a voice in the room that wasn't consistent? Was there a thread in a room that didn't follow the pattern? The first domino to fall in all of this was Jake Moreland, the tight ends coach. He was let go by the Houston Texans. And then now I think we're under a month later, we're getting Jerrod Johnson mutually parting ways because they wanted to, in many ways, change his role with the Houston Texans, right? This is a make or break year for Nick Caserio. I think this is his last year of his deal, right? He wants to get it right. He wants to continue to be in Houston. And I think in many ways, Nick Caserio is in somewhat of a war path, right? He's going to go all out this offseason. He's going to do what he needs to do to make sure this offense has everything that they need from a player perspective, from a coaching perspective. And so I don't think Johnson just fit the role anymore, especially considering, hey, Stroud has struggled. The regression has been visible. The regression has been visible for the last 26 games, right? I mean, he still has made some plays. He still has made some strides in certain areas. But what made Stroud great during that rookie year, it's been gone for 2 years, essentially. And for Stroud and Johnson, they've been together in many ways. They've had since high school. I think you look at what happened. How did we get to this point? And it is Jerrod Johnson. No doubt about it. And this is also where I want to, in some ways, end off. Like I said, I became privy to this situation a few days ago. But I think it's important to look at what's to come of all of this. What's to come? What's next, right? Will this motivate or isolate C.J. Stroud? Could there be, or are there already communication concerns that might creep up now or later? I think this is something that we need to keep an eye out on. And I'm saying this for a reason. Again, Caserio highlighted the 2026 season for a reason. Like ultimately, this next season is about getting the offense to what the vision is, with or without whoever is on board or not. And how do you tell a coach who's been with a player for a long time, who has a great rapport with a player for a long time? And I also wonder, I'm throwing this out there. I also wonder, was CJ Stroud privy to this information? Was CJ Stroud privy to this decision? I mean, he's in California right now working out. He's been, really been out there for a while now, working out, getting himself together, taking a break away, doing everything that he needs to do from a mental standpoint, from a quarterback standpoint to be better. But for Houston, was this decision, which still was made on Jerrod Johnson's behalf, at any point when this decision was made, was CJ Stroud consulting? Now, let's put a pin in that, because sometimes consulting players leads to disaster. Okay? In many ways, have the Houston Texans experienced that before? Right? I think a lot of that consulting may be, a big reason why Bobby Slowick is not here anymore. That's number one. And I go back to, did the Houston Texans even say, hey, man, this is what's going on with your guy? We just want to let you know. Did Jerrod Johnson get an opportunity to do that? Is CJ Stroud in a place right now where he's so locked in and focused, the phone, you can't even get in contact with him? Is that something that's going on? And if so, is that a concern? And I also want to highlight this before we move on to close out today's show. 2023, a lot of people say, Bobby was DeMeco's guy. The coaching staff that was brought over then at that point, those were DeMeco guys, right? Outside of some of the coaches that were retained. Now, as we move forward, the fact is, the coaches that came with DeMeco, I mean, especially when we look at we look at Bobby Slowick and Chris Strausser at that time, like, do they have the hardware? No. Now you look at who's in control now. Like, at any point did Caserio say, DeMeco, I gave you your shot to do what you needed to do. It didn't work out. Now I'm kind of forced to retreat to what works, what have worked for me for a very long time. And those are my buddies that I know that were in the building and played major roles in the Patriots winning the Super Bowl. It's not a coincidence that they went to go get Nick Caley last year, who spent time and I think in many ways appeased both parties. You go get a coach from the McVay tree. Stroud talked about that. And you also get my guy that I worked with, in many ways in New England. We have to look at what this means for down the line. And I think for Houston, down the line, this could mean if we don't figure this thing out this year, we have a coaching staff ready in place to have the pieces ready to go. And in many ways, maybe we can implement moving on. Maybe we can implement a new quarterback. Maybe we can move on if this thing doesn't work out. From a personal standpoint, from a playing standpoint, and if both sides just feel like it's not working out here in Houston. Now, there will be a new look offensive line coming soon for Houston. Let's talk about that to close out the show. And before we close out today's show, hey, it's important to talk about, everything that FanDuel is doing. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Users right now, you FanDuel guys out there and gals, if you use your profit boost on an NBA future, you'll get entered for a chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. You'll get the whole experience, flights, tickets, the whole nine. Even if you're already looking to make a lock and you're looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock it in. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Battle Red Nation closing out, man. Nick Caserio talked about, this was recently, but Caserio talked about that the Houston Texans will address their offensive line needs through free agency and the draft. What comes first? Free agency comes first, obviously. And I think, we look at guys that are available. I've talked about it before. Feels like Tyler Linderbaum is just going to be priced out, won't be able to afford him. And so that leads you to the next best thing. And for me, the next best thing in many ways, two players at the center position, Cade Mays, Connor McGovern. And so we got to look at that. The Browns, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, they have not one starting offensive lineman returning. Coach Stefanski, he comes somewhat from that McVay background, West Coast Shanahan tree background in many ways. And so you look at from a schematic standpoint, you also look at the language and some of the things that the offense will ask of the offensive linemen. Hey, they'll fit perfectly here in Houston. Also, they'll be vets. Now, for Caserio to mention, hey, we're going to attack the offensive line and improve and make upgrades through both free agency and the draft, it's hard to overlook Houston sitting at 28 and not maybe picking the best offensive lineman available. It's hard. It's also like the scenario that I see for Houston really sits on the Texans taking 28 and trading back to draft Emmanuel Pregnon, or maybe trading up if the kid from Penn State is there. But I think the first two draft picks are going to be offensive linemen. And I know Caserio has a past of not drafting good offensive linemen up until recently, last year, who many of us with eyes and ears that watch the game in different ways, we believe Ariante Ursery can be a damn good offensive lineman for a long time for the Texans. What's the difference between last year and the years prior? Voices in the room. Hey guys, we got to look at the importance of having consistent voices in the room. And so for the Texans, for football in general, it's an ego-driven sport. It's an ego-driven league. But successful franchises, players put their ego to the side, just like coaches put their ego to the side. But when you put your ego to the side, that doesn't mean you can't stand up in a room and say, hey, I like this guy. I think we need to get him. I think he fits what we're looking for, and here's why. And when you put egos to the side, one guy can present a player that you absolutely love for a team, and every other coach, every other front office staff, scout, they'll sit back and say, hey, this makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. And the voice that changed, I think, a lot how we should view everything from the offensive line perspective, Cole Popovich. He played the game. I think he presents a demeanor in which he wants his offensive linemen to translate on the field, right? Case in point, when you look at D'Amico, you see the defense. And when you see the defense, you look at a unit that represents their head coach. Fiery, nasty, passionate, relentless, right? The offensive line didn't have it last year. So what happened prior to last year? They get, who I think in many ways, great player, never raised the bar. They get Laremy Tunsil's voice out of here. What does that mean? You move on from Laremy Tunsil, I think that shows the entire offensive line room what was acceptable years prior is not acceptable moving forward. And I also think in many ways that put Titus Howard on notice. We're not going to talk about Titus Howard a lot and remember him for many things, but Titus Howard had a damn good year last year. And last year was Titus Howard's first year being the absolute leader of that offensive line room. And I think, what doesn't show up on tape, or maybe when you talk to him in person, what stood out the most to me is, hey man, we got to be a better run team. Everything ain't one word responses. Everything ain't just cool and laid back. We get our ass kicked in short yardage situations. We got to be better. So they move on from Laremy Tunsil, and in many ways, that improves the offensive line in many ways. They draft Arion Terry. They bring in a nasty Ed Ingram, and this is probably the first redemption project for Cole Popovich that he was asked to, work on, and it worked out. Laker Thompson failed, so maybe you're looking at a 1-for-2 situation, still 50% from the field. You can live with that. In many ways, it helped redeem Jake Andrews. But what I'm getting at is, as the Houston Texans look forward to recreating, reestablishing, and just reshaping this offensive line to get it to the level which it needs to be, because I gave you guys the numbers. The rushing success rate the last 3 years under DeMeco Ryans, I think 30, 29, and 31st. That's not going to work. So in order for them to get to a place where the offensive line is reshaped altogether, what needs to happen? The one voice in the room leading the charge, being the advocate of what, hey, this is what works best for offensive line. Okay. This also works best with what the offensive coordinator is asking for in his system, which works. Okay. How can I present players to the front office staff, to the scouts, to the general manager that fit what we need here in Houston, that we lack? Houston lacks it from the center position. Houston lacks it from the left guard position. And if they don't retain Ed Ingram, which I kind of view Ed Ingram in many ways like a player Houston may feel like they can live without. If the money ain't adding up, thank you, brother, but okay, make another hole. We can make another hole, right? This new offensive line, and here's the thing. Let me put it out there now before I close off today's show. If the new offensive line ain't worth much, then that's a direct indication to everybody on the offensive side of the ball. Scouts, coaching staff, front office, the whole nine. But they are lacking center, left guard. K. Mays is a name who can potentially make between $5 to $7 million annually. I think that's perfect for the Houston Texans. He'd be a immediate upgrade. He climbs to the second level very well. I think he handles everything you want a center to handle in terms of pressure. And I think he's just a vet that understands what needs to happen to win. Leverage, communication. When he's out there, a lot of people saying that in Carolina, you get a better Bryce Young. The Texans need a better CJ Stroud. The center position is upgrade is huge for Houston. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube. Thank you to my Locked On Texans fans, listeners, and viewers and listeners for watching today's show. We got more Combine Talk that will be coming out for tomorrow. Follow me on Instagram as well at Some Sports Guy. Squad show coming up soon. Peace.